least 4 people have died as record snowfall blanketed the South Korean capital for a second day. Authorities say the extreme weather also disrupted public transport.
Delight after the heaviest snowfall in 100 years soon turned to concern about disruption and danger. More than 100 flights were cancelled and ferry services interrupted. Several casualties were also reported in from collapsing structures and traffic accidents.
Since it's the first snow, it feels so nice, right? It brightens my mood. But at the same time, I worry about traffic accidents or whether students and office workers will face any issues commuting.
Over 40 centimeters of snow accumulated in some areas of the capital, Seoul. For those who could stay safe, it turned the city into a wintry wonderland.
It's been snowing so much today. It's freezing and chilly. But having a cup of hot fish cake soup out here really helps warm me up.
To be honest, I was a little concerned about the traffic. But because it's snow, I got excited because I thought I might be able to see some beautiful scenery, even just for a short while.
The cause of the snowstorm has been attributed to warmer than usual sea temperatures west of the Korean peninsula, encountering cold air currents.
Right now at 11 o'clock, a deadly house fire in the Hollywood Hills. And tonight we're learning about the man with the very famous last name who lived and died there. Eyewitness News reporter Jory Rand live in the Hollywood Hills with the breaking new details tonight. Jory.
Mark, firefighters had a difficult time accessing this home because it's set so far back off the road, and it's at the top of a very steep hill with a very thin stairwell leading up there. Once they did access the home, they made the tragic discovery inside, and it turns out the man who lived there might have been a billionaire. Hollywood Hills neighbors did everything they could to put out this raging fire that broke out in a home on Lookout Mountain Avenue.
I was going up the stairs, and right as I approached the top of the stairs, the flames burst out of the house.
Firefighters knocked down the flames in about 20 minutes, but found the home's elderly occupant dead inside. Neighbors identifying him as Will Rothschild of the Rothschild family.
We're getting a new roof put on tomorrow, and so I told my wife to email him to make sure it's okay that we use part of his driveway. And he never responded. And I said, well, that's so unlike him.
Rothschild is described by neighbors as an eccentric millionaire or even billionaire with multiple properties and dozens of some of the most expensive cars on earth. But on a street lined with multi-million-dollar homes and mansions occupied by celebrities and the powerful, Rothschild was said to have lived as a bit of a recluse in a small, old, rickety home in conditions described as that of a hoarder, something the fire department seemed to tactfully confirm tonight.
Given the fire damage, it's kind of hard to determine how much of that was prior to the fire and how much of it is the building itself that has been demolished by the fire.
And while some neighbors had never even seen him and assumed the house was vacant, those that did know him are saddened by the loss.
It is very sad. He was a good guy, good neighbor.
This is very tough for those that knew him. Arson investigators were on scene, but the fire department tells me that is typical for any fire in which someone loses their life. Once they cleared their investigation, the coroner came to remove the body. We are now awaiting a cause of death to see whether he had passed before the fire or he perished within the fire. Now we await to see what kind of treasures may have been inside of this. We've already gotten a peek at some of the cars on the property. There are high-end vintage cars, including one that a neighbor says once belonged to Michael Jordan. We're live in the Hollywood Hills tonight. Jory Rand, ABC 7
News, covering Fairfax County now, where suspected members of a violent Venezuelan gang considered more powerful than police in South America have reportedly arrived. Our Tom Rousey investigated and finds out what they're accused of already doing here in Tysons.
Back in summer 2023, 3 men allegedly came here to the Tysons Galleria and committed grand larceny by stealing from some of the high-end stores. Now, that wouldn't normally make the news, but it is now making the news because of what we've recently learned about those 3 suspects and their alleged ties to a violent Venezuelan gang. According to court records, these 3 men in their 20s came down from New York and were captured by Fairfax County Police with $9,000 of stolen merchandise in their car. Court records list a witness at the Neiman Marcus at the Tysons Galleria, as well as another witness at the Gucci store at that same high-end mall. Those witnesses were there as the men allegedly committed grand larceny. Tuesday, Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis said on 7 News, the men have suspected ties to a violent Venezuelan gang named TDA for Tren de Aragua.
They weren't necessarily committing traditional gang-related crimes, extortion, aggravated assault, robberies, but they were stealing.
Tren de Aragua operated out of this Venezuelan prison for years. The gang basically ran things to the point where it installed a swimming pool and even restaurants at the prison. The gang is considered more powerful than police in Venezuela, and it has made its way to the United States, where alleged members have committed violence, such as shooting at police officers in New York City. So far in our area,
we're not seeing any violence associated with them yet. We want to keep it that way.
This week, the New York Post reported it had obtained a memo that specifically warns police in Virginia that the gang has come there and also has members living in D.C. The memo says the gang was allegedly connected to immigrants exploited into forced labor in, quote, Northwest Virginia. Now, as for the 3 suspected of stealing in Fairfax County, court records show all 3 had previous charges in New York, and all 3 were released in Virginia and then either didn't show up to court or violated pretrial release terms, and they are all listed as fugitives. In Tysons, Tom Rousey, 7 News.
And you can see our full interview with Fairfax Police Chief Kevin Davis on YouTube by scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now. It's a wide-ranging conversation from his gang unit's crackdown to how you can help the county fight crime. 7 News has reached out, by the way, to Northern Virginia and D.C. police departments to see if they've also encountered Southern American gangs. We are awaiting several responses, but so far, Prince William and Arlington County say they've made no contact with the gang.
A federal appeals court has blocked the Biden administration from removing Texas's razor wire fences along the southern border. This ruling marks the latest development in an ongoing legal battle between the federal government and states over border security. CBS Austin's Jamal Kennedy joins us live outside the Texas state capitol tonight. And Jamal, how are Texas leaders responding to this significant ruling tonight?
Well, Texas leaders are saying that this decision is a huge win for the state and border security.
This is an unprecedented attack on our country.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott made this statement to Operation Lone Star agents yesterday in Eagle Pass. Today, on the social media platform X, he was celebrating a ruling given from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, siding with the state to keep its razor wire fences along the border.
To deter, to deny illegal entry into our country, to help deal with the consequences of it, to make your state more secure.
The ruling says the state is entitled to a preliminary injunction because it is seeking only to safeguard its own property, not regulate Border Patrol.
This mission that you're on right now is on your homeland. A mission on your homeland to preserve the safety and sovereignty and security of your very own state.
Back in January, the Biden administration asked the Supreme Court to allow Border Patrol agents to cut the razor wire, saying it impeded agents' ability to get to migrants as they crossed the river. Governor Abbott says in a social media post, President Biden was wrong to cut the wire. Meanwhile, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton says, in part, that the state has, quote, fought every step of the way for Texas sovereignty and security, end quote. In the opinion, the court says the razor wire is necessary to fulfill its duty of patrolling the border to prevent illegal entry into the country.
Of a threat that's not on some foreign land, but a threat on your very own border.
Now, the case is one of several ongoing immigration-related legal battles between Texas and the Biden administration, which could see a shift in approach from the Justice Department under President-elect Donald Trump's second term in office. Reporting live outside the Texas state capitol, Jamal Kennedy, CBS Austin News.
One day after announcing a plan to impose 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico and an additional 10% on products from China, President-elect Trump selected trade attorney Jamieson Greer to be U.S. trade representative under his new administration. Greer will work to impose the trade plan Trump announced Monday. CBS News spoke with the owner of Columbus Hardware in New York about the potential impact of the policy on small businesses.
Our prices would go up. We would be paying more for every object that came from China, Mexico, Canada. Therefore, we'd have to put that on to the customer. They look at the prices here, and if we're not pretty even with those competitors, they won't buy.
Catherine Cobden joins us now. She's the president and CEO of the Canadian Steel Producers Association. Thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. The trade relationship between the U.S. and Canada is two-sided. Roughly how much steel is imported and exported between the two countries?
Thanks for having me. Yes, indeed. We're each other's largest trading partner in steel. So about 20% of all the steel consumed in the United States, or the imports consumed, is from Canada. And about 40% of the imports consumed in Canada are from the United States. So we're really each other's largest trading partner.
Catherine, what sectors would be most impacted by tariffs like this, and how soon would the consumer feel the impact?
Yeah, for sure. So the sectors that will be most affected will be the sectors like automotive sector, the energy sector, the construction sector, infrastructure. So, you know, that is the consequence of tariffs that between trading partners like ourselves, is that consumer prices will rise. I think the tariffs are a legitimate tool, and it will be really important to talk about how we put tariffs on bad actors like China.
The U.S., Canada, and Mexico have a 2020 trade agreement that's up for review in 2026. Would new tariffs imposed by the U.S. violate any aspects of that?
Well, currently, the entire principle of CUSMA of USMCA is free in trade and tariff-free trade between our two nations and Mexico. So obviously, you know, trade experts are saying that that might be a challenge. But again, I go back to tariffs are a legitimate tool on bad actors. Canada and the U.S. have the exact same tariffs on China, and that's really where I hope we can concentrate our discussions moving forward.
Yeah, let's talk about those discussions. Are you hoping you or other stakeholders can come to the table with Trump and renegotiate? What are the next steps here?
Yeah, we see the next steps as really being our government sitting down with President-elect Trump's new administration once they're in office, and really beginning a dialogue, a constructive dialogue, and real actions that can be taken to ensure that bad actors in steel trade, and there's plenty out there, that we're working together for economic thriving by both of our industries, both sides of the border, and working against those countries that are practicing unfair trade and dumping steel into our mutual marketplace.
Catherine Cobden, thank you so much for joining us.
Great, thanks for having me.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have provisions for immunity that shield from prosecution at the International Criminal Court. The French Foreign Ministry has said that the Israeli leader is covered by immunity rules that apply to states which are not party to the ICC. Remember, Israel is not an ICC member, of course. Now, the French statement says the state cannot act in a way that is incompatible with its obligations regarding immunities granted to such states. France has asserted that such immunities apply to Netanyahu, as well as other ministers in question, and they must be taken into consideration if they're asked by the ICC to arrest and hand them over. Earlier, the Foreign Minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, had said that France considered that some leaders could enjoy immunity from ICC prosecution. This was the first statement of its kind where France had evoked a possible immunity. Well, Jean-Noël Barrot, the French Foreign Minister, had said that the ICC had issued warrants for Netanyahu. And the former Israel Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and the Hamas military chief Mohammed Deif were also sanctioned earlier this month. Now, the EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell has said the arrest warrants are binding and they should be implemented. But France has so far taken a more cautious stance on the warrants, unlike other European states. Britain, for instance, has claimed it would follow due process if Benjamin Netanyahu were to visit the UK.
We are signatories to the Rome Statute. We have always been committed to our obligations under international law and international humanitarian law. Of course, if there were to be such a visit to the UK, there would be a court process and due process would be followed in relation to those issues.
Earlier this week, Italy also reacted to the arrest warrants, saying it's ready to respect its obligations but needs clarity on how it would work in Netanyahu's case. Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani stressed that there are many legal doubts and that feasibility of the warrant seems very theoretical to him because Netanyahu will never go to a country where he can be arrested.
Shifting focus now to how Russia's patience is running out. Moscow, in fact, has warned the West against pushing further. This comes as Ukraine faces relentless attacks and the US ramps up its military support for Kiev. The missile barrage on Ukraine has left 1 million people without electricity. Our next report, getting you the latest from the battlefield.
Russian forces unleashed a massive assault on Ukraine. Missiles and drones rained down on Kyiv, Kharkiv and Odessa. Temperatures plunge and emergency power outages leave millions in the cold. In Kyiv, residents, some holding small babies, seek refuge in metro stations as explosions rock the city.
Our mornings begin with checking the phone to see if there is an air alert. I have to take the eldest daughter to school. We saw that there was an air alert and went to the metro. What do we think about all this? We are indeed fed up with all of it.
The overnight strikes cripple Ukraine's already fragile infrastructure, adding new misery to the war-torn nation. Kyiv says it will continue to mount more assaults. Ukraine's recent strikes on Russian border regions using American and British missiles have further escalated tensions.
The recent authorization for long-range strikes on military facilities in Russia helped, but the pressure on Russia must be maintained and increased at different levels so that Russia feels what war is.
Backed by US permission to strike Russian territory, these attacks have enraged Moscow, leading to threats of severe retaliation. Russia responds with mounting fury, warning that its tolerance for Western interference has reached a breaking point. Moscow calls the firing of Western weapons as provocative.
Every wave of escalation from the West is going to be decisively responded to. I will be frank, we believe that it is our right to use our weapons against military facilities of those countries who allow the use of weapons against our facilities.
President Biden is rushing additional aid to Kyiv. The US has already sent over $56 billion in military support since 2022. More funding is on the way as Biden's administration aims to arm Ukraine with what it needs to hold off Russian advances. Washington is now pushing Kyiv to do more. The White House is urging Ukraine to bolster its troop levels, calling for the mobilization of 18-year-olds. Officials argue Ukraine must increase its manpower if it hopes to sustain its fight against Russia's superior forces. Experts say the Biden administration's strategy is fraught with risk, potentially pushing the conflict into an even more dangerous escalatory cycle. With Biden running out of time to make lasting decisions before his term ends, the stakes have never been higher. Ukraine is battered but determined, while Russia continues to strengthen its position on the battlefield.
Well, countries and leaders around the world are reacting to the absurd ICC decision to issue arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, with a range of responses. But perhaps no world leader has been more vocal than the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, who once again is taking things a little too far. Let's take a look.
Prime Minister Netanyahu isn't only being threatened by the International Criminal Court. In the aftermath of the ICC's decision to issue arrest warrants, Supreme Leader of Iran Ali Khamenei spoke with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' Basij forces and stated that the arrest warrant was insufficient and that Netanyahu should be given the death penalty.
کاری که اینا کردن پیروزی نیست، جنایت جنگی است. حکم بازداشتشو صادر کردن کافی نیست. حکم اعدام نتانیاهو.
The event itself also featured the regime's famous chants of death to America and death to Israel, and was attended by the head of the IRGC. In Khamenei's speech, he also accused Israel of bombing hospitals and homes, a sentiment he echoed on X, where he was called out on his hypocrisy. The Islamic regime's involvement in funding terror proxies has resulted in countless attacks on hospitals and civilian homes. The event was held while Khamenei and the entire regime face increasing pressure as they conduct execution sprees of jailed dissidents and protesters in Iran. In October alone, over 160 Iranians were executed by the regime, including German citizen and U.S. resident Jamshid Sharmad, who was kidnapped by the regime from his hotel in Dubai and executed last month. Today, many Iranians face the death penalty, including 6 boys from Ekbatan who were jailed for participation in protests. The Ekbatan boys are now facing imminent execution, prompting outrage from the public and from human rights groups. Despite this pressure, the Islamic regime has remained steadfast in its commitment to the destruction of Israel and support for terrorism, even at the expense of the safety and security of the entire nation of Iran.
Staying with France, hypocrisy is not their only problem. They're also dealing with public anger, especially from their farmers. French farmers have taken to the streets again. They're driving their tractors down various cities. They're dumping hay and manure outside government buildings. And they're also building walls, concrete walls, outside government offices. Now, this is a symbolic gesture to express their anger at an impending trade deal. This is a deal between Europe and South America. It's a free trade agreement. It has been in the works for 25 years. It would create one of the largest free trade zones in the world, but the French farmers are not happy about any of this. Our next report tells you why.
French farmers are out in full force. They have donned yellow beanies, boarded their tractors, and they're marching towards government buildings all over France. They are setting up camps outside some of the offices, building bonfires and cooking French sausages and sending that smell over to the government buildings nearby. Other offices aren't as lucky though. Some of the protesting farmers have brought other things with them, like hay and liquid manure. They're setting the hay ablaze and then dousing it with the manure. That also sends quite the smell into the government buildings, but of a very different kind. And the newest type of farmer protest took place in Paris outside France's National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment. The farmers brought concrete blocks with them and started building a wall outside the institute's gate. The farmers glued the blocks together and erected a wall that was almost 6 feet high. And then they spray painted this. It's a pun changing the word environment to scam, because that is what the French farmers feel. They feel they've been scammed by environmental regulations. Europe is on the verge of signing a deal with some South American countries. It's a free trade agreement between the European Union and Mercosur. Mercosur is a South American regional trade bloc comprising of Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, Uruguay and Paraguay. The EU has been working on a deal with them for about 25 years. Negotiations began in the year 1999, and a draft deal was announced back in 2019. Mercosur is meeting next month on December 5th and 6th, and it hopes to finalize the deal. Most of Europe is on board. They want the deal to be done too. But France is a notable holdout because French farmers do not want this deal. French farmers believe a free trade agreement with South American nations will destroy their livelihoods. French farmers have been abiding by European agricultural standards. They are forbidden from using certain pesticides or growth hormones. This is to ensure the safety of European crops and meat and more natural and healthier produce. But that also makes them more expensive. So what happens when cheap pesticide and hormone-filled South American goods flood the European markets? How will farmers in France and the rest of Europe compete? A lot of them probably won't be able to, and that is why they are protesting. They feel the EU-Mercosur deal will destroy their industry. France is the EU's agricultural powerhouse. French farmers are responsible for about 1/5 of the bloc's agricultural output. So they will be hit the hardest by a free trade deal with Mercosur. That's why they are the ones protesting the most. The French government too wants to change the terms of the deal. French lawmakers from every party want changes to the agreement or scrap it altogether. But their hands are tied. It's not up to them alone. This is an EU-wide deal, so they will need support from other countries to block the agreement. So far, France has support from Poland, Austria and the Netherlands. But even then, they don't have the numbers to stop the deal. It could still go through. That is why the French farmers are resorting to ever more elaborate protests. They hope that by building enough pressure, their voices will be heard and the rest of Europe will notice their plight.